exciting? Yeah, I think we can get a little more excited. Wasn't that exciting? Yeah. And isn't it exciting to think that there's two more young people who were really eager to be part of this morning, and that we get to look forward to seeing two more young people get baptized. I'm pretty excited about that. Let me ask you a question. When you think of great, what do you think of? When you think of great people, who do you think of? And maybe you think of Wayne Gretzky, the great one, number 99, who will arguably go down as the greatest hockey player of all time. Now, I know, Sidney Crosby and Connor McDavid, but when you're called the great one, I kind of think that you have the title. Maybe you think of Muhammad Ali, the greatest one ever, right? Maybe you think Muhammad Ali as great. Maybe you're not so much into sports. Maybe you think, like, William Shakespeare is maybe one of the greatest authors of all time. Maybe you think musically, and maybe you think the Beatles, or you think Elvis. And you have these ideas of great. Now, what makes them great? If we were to describe them as great, the fact that they even some of these people have great in their title. You go all the way back, you think maybe Alexander the Great. Why do the people have great in the title? Why do we think of them as great? Well, because they're really great at what they do. Wayne Gretzky was really great at hockey. Muhammad Ali, really great at boxing. William Shakespeare, really great at writing. The Beatles, Elvis Presley, really great at music. And we look at them and say, that I could never, ever do that. I couldn't do that. I wouldn't even come close. Now, for those of you who were in my Sunday school class this morning, the problem is we just talked about not looking and comparing ourselves to others. But we're just going to do this for a quick second, okay? And so when we look at people who are great, we are astounded at how talented they are. But one of the things that happens with people who are great is their greatness at some point will usually end. They either retire or maybe they die. Think of the mass hysteria that occurred when the Beatles broke up. Think about that. And the people who were crying and crying because the Beatles were no more. There's a boy band, a really famous boy band right now that they just broke up. One of the guys just left. And it was all over Facebook and Twitter and everything. And everyone was so upset about it because this greatness is gone. And we like to worship those who are great. We like to declare how great they are. And what we're going to see in Exodus 15, if you turn with me to Exodus chapter 15, is a declaration of one who is great. And what we see is Moses and all of Israel sing a song about how great God is. They sing a song to God, because what has God done for Israel? We come to Exodus chapter 15, and I just want to do a really quick recap of what God has done for Israel. Israel has been enslaved to Egypt for 400 years, and God has brought them out from under the slavery of Egypt, and God brought them to the Red Sea, and they thought they were going to be destroyed by the Egyptians when they came, and they waited, and they cried out to God, and they thought, we're going to die. And God parts the Red Sea for them, and they cross over on the Red Sea, and they get to the other side of the Red Sea, and they look back only to see the Red Sea come back together and destroy the Egyptians. And they knew at that point that they were truly free from the slavery of the Egyptians. And so Moses writes this song about how great God is and what God has just done for them. But the question I ask is, God has rescued and delivered them from this song. And we're going to go through this song, but I think we are not standing at the banks of the Red Sea watching the Egyptian army be destroyed by waters, right? We're sitting here in Fellowship Baptist Church, maybe in the auditorium, in the cafe, and so how does this song apply to us? Why is this song such a great song for us to look at? Well, this song is such a great song for us to look at because Moses just doesn't give one line about what God has just done. What Moses does is in the retelling of the story of their exodus out of Egypt and God destroying the Egyptians, Moses highlights for us 5 characteristics about God that cause Moses to worship. Yes, for sure, Moses is worshiping God because of the destruction of the Egyptians, because God has just delivered them from the slavery. But the problem would be is if God is only worthy of our worship because of what he has done for us lately, there would be times where we say, I don't know if I'm going to worship God today. I don't know if I'm going to worship God today. And there's more to worshiping God than just praising God for what he has done. And what Moses does is in the telling of this story of what God has done for them, he also declares 5 characteristics of God that should cause all of us to worship God all the time. 5 characteristics of God that should always cause us to desire to worship God. It should compel us to worship God. And so in Exodus chapter 15, he starts off in verse 1 by saying this. Moses and the people of Israel sang this song to the Lord, saying, I will sing to the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously. The horse and the rider he has thrown into the sea. And the song could end right there. Because it says, I will sing to the Lord, he has triumphed. And he tells us what happened. I'm going to sing because he's thrown the horse and the rider into the sea. If you were to look up an encyclopedia of what God had just done, there it is, right there. God has destroyed Egypt. He's thrown the horse and the rider into the sea. And one of the amazing things about the song that Moses writes is it doesn't end. It'd be really boring if it just ended there, wouldn't it? That would be a really bad song. Well, I guess it'd still be okay, but it'd be a really bad song in my opinion if it just ended after that one line. And so Moses is going to take the rest of the song to declare what God has done and to declare these 5 amazing characteristics of God. That when we come to these 5 characteristics, we will say, yeah, I have to worship. I'm compelled to worship. I must worship. And that at the start of this verse, when Moses says, I will sing to the Lord, it's, I am compelled to sing to the Lord. I must sing to the Lord. I can't do anything but sing to the Lord because he has triumphed gloriously. The horse and the rider he has thrown into the sea. And what I really like about this phrase, triumphed gloriously, is it's actually the same word repeated twice. Now, it translates different in a Bible because if we read it, he is gloriously glorious. It wouldn't really work for us in our English. We think that's kind of a weird saying. But that's really what it says. He is gloriously glorious. I'm going to use it, attach the adverb to the verb and double it up. I'm going to double it up because of how gloriously glorious he is and because of what he has done. So the introduction to this song that Moses highlights for us is that I'm singing this song because God is gloriously glorious. He has saved us. He has rescued us. He has thrown the horse and the rider. He has thrown the Egyptians into the sea. And I'm just going to quickly describe the structure of the song to you so you can kind of see how amazing it is. When we sing worship songs in here, we have verses on the screen. And we know when the verses come and the chorus comes. And in our hymnals, if you open it up, you kind of see there's verses and they're all right there in the chorus. Well, here's the song. So if you're ever wondering, are there structure? Do they just kind of start singing this thing, or how does this work? Verses 2 through 5 are verse 1. And then you'll see verse 6 starts verse 2, and what we'll see is there's a repetition. You see the repetition in verse 6? Your right hand, O Lord, your right hand, O Lord. And then it goes through till verse 10. Then verse 3, we have another repetition. Who is like you, O Lord? Who is like you? And that starts verse 3, and that goes through 16a, the first half of 16a. And then the fourth verse starts with, till your people, O Lord, till your people pass by. And then there's a conclusion in verse 18. And you see how Moses has done that, where there's that repetition? So if you're going back through and you want to say, where's the verse breakdown and how does Moses sing this song? And maybe I want to write some music for this song so that we can actually sing this song together exactly like this. Here, this would be the verse breakdown. 2 to 5, 6 through 10, 11 through 16a, and 16b through 17, and then the conclusion. And so it's really neat as you see that breakdown happen. And what you would also see is at the end of the chat, or the end of it, Miriam comes out, and Miriam and the women sing this the song, "Sing the Lord, He has triumphed gloriously. The horse and rider is thrown into the sea." It's kind of like the chorus of it, and they would repeat that, and that would be the chorus that they would repeat. So it's kind of neat to see the structure that happens in this song as Moses sings it. So for us, we won't be singing today that God has thrown the horse and rider into the sea. That's not what we could sing that because God has done that. And this is a song that continues to be sung and will be sung, we'll see later on, for all eternity. But why should we sing to God? Why should we worship God? What is it about God that causes us to worship Him? Well, the first verse, in verses 2 through 5, is because God is a personal God. We should worship God because He is a personal God. We see this, like I said, in verse 1, verses 2 through 5. It says this, "The Lord is my strength and my song. He has become my salvation. This is my God. I will praise him. My father's God. I will exalt him. The Lord is a man of war. The Lord is his name. Pharaoh's chariots and his host he cast into the sea, and his chosen officers were sunk in the Red Sea. The floods covered them. They went down into the depths like a stone. Do you see that personal aspect to who God is in Moses' eyes? He is my strength. He is my song, my salvation, my God, my Father's God. God is a personal God. God is not a distant God. God is not an abstract God, but God is a personal God who loves us. And because God is a personal God, not an abstract God, God comes down and rescues Moses, rescues all of Israel from the hands of the Egyptians. And what I love about what we'll see throughout this is his description is he's my personal God, he is my salvation. What has he done? So after he gives a description about God's characteristics, he reminds us again, Pharaoh's chariots and his host he's cast in the sea. His chosen officers were sunk in the Red Sea. A couple of things about this. One, chosen officers. Egypt was the most powerful nation at the time. And these were the best of the best. So these are the best officers of the best army that God has destroyed. He sunk to the bottom of the sea. They have gone down to the depths. So one, it's that God has destroyed the best of the best. There is no greater on earth than these soldiers here that God has just destroyed. Secondly, they sunk down to the depths of the sea. So if you're talking to people and they say, really, when God parted it, what actually happened is because it's translated the Sea of Reeds, is it was really shallow. And there was a tsunami that pulled the water out, and the Israelites were able to walk across. And then when it came in, that's what wiped out the Egyptian army. And there are people who believe that this is what happened to scientifically explain this. I have a hard time describing reeds that they could walk through, like if you see a reed like this, describing that as depths. Describing that as depths. Over and over again, it talks about they sunk down to the depths. They sunk down to the depths. So if you're talking to people about this and they say, really, that didn't happen, it was really the tsunami, or they try to explain it some other way, you can take them to this and say, then is Moses just really dumb in saying that they sunk down to the depths? No, it's great waters, depths, really great descriptions of a deep sea, of an actual deep sea that they drowned in. And so God destroys them in the water. And what is the other thing is, you'll see at the end of verse 5, and we'll see a repetition that occurs. They went down into the depths like a stone. And they sunk down to the depths like a stone. They are not coming back from the deep. They are not coming back, and they are dead as a stone. When we were growing up in our family, we go to the cottage, and we'd like to find boulders or rocks or cliffs to jump off of. Anyone enjoy doing that? Maybe right? It's kind of a fun thing to do. When you go and you find a new place to jump off of, though, what do you have to make sure of before you jump off? It's deep enough. Yeah, you have to make sure it's deep enough, because if you jump off and it's not deep enough, then you're in trouble. And so my one brother thought one time, well, it's really, really deep, we can't see the bottom, and if we kind of swim down, we still can't see the bottom. Well, what's a quicker way to get down to the bottom? So he goes and grabs a big rock, and he sort of grabs it off the shore there, and he lets it take him down to the bottom, and holds on to it while going down to the bottom. Which, when you're 12 years old, you think is a good idea. Until the bottom comes a lot quicker than you think, and your hands are around the rock, and you smash your hands on the bottom because with the rock. And my brother swam back up and had some bloody nails and bruised hands and things like that. You know where that rock is? Still at the bottom. I'm assuming the rock's still at the bottom. I don't think anyone has gone and fished it out yet, but I haven't swam down to see it still there, but it is still at the bottom. And we all know what happens when we chuck a rock, it sinks right down to the bottom, especially big rocks. That's the description that Moses uses here, is that the Egyptian army is at the bottom, they are dead as a rock, and they are not coming back. There is no one who survived the waters that God brought back over them. So we should worship God because he's a personal God, and in his personalness, he's there. He's the salvation for Israel. And we're able to cry out and say, he is my God. He is my Father's God. He is my salvation. He is my song. And it's great to be able to sing and to worship a God who is a personal God. But not only is God a personal God, but God is also a powerful God. God is also a powerful God. And we see that in the second section of Moses' song, and it starts in verse 6. It says, your right hand, O Lord, glorious in power. Your right hand, O Lord, shatters the enemy. In the greatness of your majesty, you overthrow your adversaries. You send out your fury, and it consumes them like stubble. At the blast of your nostrils, the waters piled up. The flood stood up in a heap. The deeps congealed in the heart of the sea. The enemy said, I will pursue. I will overtake. I will divide the spoil. My desire shall have its fill of them. I will draw my sword. My hand shall destroy them. You blew your wind, and the sea covered them, and they sank like lead in mighty waters. So we see here that God is a powerful God. Right off the start, when he repeats, your right hand, O Lord, your right hand is glorious in power. The right hand is that hand of strength, that arm of strength. And most of us, I would think, are probably right-handed. And in the biblical times, it's like you weren't allowed to be left-handed. There's one man in the Bible who is described as being left-handed, and it's Ehud. And the thing about him, why they say he's left-handed, and they highlight that, is because it was so weird for him to be left-handed. And it was abnormal for him to be left-handed. So this idea of your right hand is the idea of power. And he says, your right hand is powerful. In fact, your right hand shatters the enemy. You overthrow your adversaries. You consume them. And so this is God's power that does all of these things. He is a powerful, powerful God. In fact, God is so powerful that when his fury comes out, it consumes them like stubble. It consumes them like stubble. Now, what is stubble? I'm not talking about the fact that I forgot to shave this morning. That's not what I mean. That's not what we're talking about when we say stubble. And it's a very near thing to the Israelites' hearts at this point in time. Because stubble is what was left in the fields after a harvest. And so they would harvest grains in Egypt, and usually you would use the hay, the stalks from the grains, and the Israelites would use it to make brick, because that's what they're used to make. And when Moses comes along, Moses comes and says to Pharaoh, let my people go. And you remember what Pharaoh says? Pharaoh says, no, and in fact, for your audacity in asking me to let your people go, I'm no longer providing the hay for them to make the bricks. They have to go and collect it from the fields. Well, all that's left in the fields is stubble. All that's left in the fields is that stubble. So it's a very near thing to the Israelites' hearts because they were so mad about it at this time. And what God is saying is, I am so powerful, or Moses is saying that God is so powerful that his fury consumes the army, the most powerful army on earth, as if it's just that little stubble that's out in the fields. And the way they would get rid of that stubble is normally they wouldn't collect it like the Israelites had to do to make the brick, is that they would light it on fire. And that it would just quickly vanish, quickly go away. It would go up just like that, very, very easily to light on fire. And Moses says, compared to the Egyptian army, God is so powerful that his fury just consumes them like stubble. They are just like little bits of stubble compared to God. But not only is God that powerful that he consumes them like stubble, but then in verse 8, it says, a blast from your nostrils, the waters piled up. God parted the Red Sea with a blast from his nostrils. Okay, everyone without sneezing on the person in front of you, see how powerful a blast from your nostrils are. All right, go. Right. If you sit there and you do it, it's not powerful at all. I was thinking about it. If I wanted to blow something over, like a piece of paper up here on the stand, I would not do it with my nostrils. I'd at least do it with my mouth, with my lungs, and like that, it would make it move. With my nostrils, it doesn't even move. It doesn't even close to moving. And God is so powerful that a blast from his nostrils parts the Red Sea, is the way that Moses describes it. A blast from his nostrils parts the Red Sea. That's powerful. That's powerful. Think of the Outdoor Life Network. I don't know if any of you watch the Outdoor Life Network. When I was growing up, I watched the Outdoor Life Network. And we watched the World's Strongest Man competition. And you have these massive guys that they walk around like these because of their muscles. And so these big guys are huge, and they have to carry boulders, and they have to flip tires, and they have to carry these huge chains. And there's this one, I remember his name, Magnus Vermagnuson. And with a name like Magnus Vermagnuson, you have to be big and strong. Like, you can just picture Magnus Vermagnuson in your mind probably right now without even ever seeing him. And he was the 4-time champion of the World's Strongest Man competition. And then afterwards was one of those commentators that after he wasn't strong enough to win the competition, he became a commentator for them. And I just remember he destroyed everyone else. It wasn't even close in some of these competitions with how good Magnus Ver Magnuson was. Do you know what happened if Magnus Ver Magnuson blew his nostrils at the Red Sea? Nothing. Wouldn't even come close. I don't think it would make a ripple in the water if he blew his nostrils at the Red Sea. God is so powerful that God, a blast from his nostrils, a simple blast from his nostril, whole Red Sea parts, and all of Israel walks across. Isn't that power? Isn't that amazing when you think about that? And this next part I really like in the passage. So God consumes them like their stubble. He parts the Red Sea with a blast from his nostrils. But Pharaoh still thinks that he's powerful. Pharaoh still thinks, his pride still gets hold of him. His heart is hardened, and he says in verse 9, I will pursue, I will overtake, I will divide the spoil. My desire shall have its fill of them. I will draw my sword. My hand shall destroy them. And what's it say in verse 10? Again, God blasts his nostrils and destroys them. God parts the Red Sea with a blast from his nostrils. Pharaoh's heart is hardened, and he says, I'm going to do this because I am the most powerful ruler on earth. In fact, I am a god, and I will chase them, and I will have my way. And God's like, no, you won't. Blast from the nostrils, Red Sea comes back together, and it's just like that, they're destroyed. That's power. That is power. That is absolutely amazing when you think of that. So we have that. We worship God because he is a personal God. We can say, he is my God. He is our personal God. We also worship God because he is a powerful God. It's not just right back then, thousands of years ago, when God parted the Red Sea, that he's a powerful God. He has always been a powerful God. He always will be a powerful God. His power is never greater nor less. It is always power. So God is a personal God. God is a powerful God. But we also should worship God because he is the supreme God. We should worship God because he is the supreme God. Look with me, starting in verse 11. Who is like you, O Lord, among the gods? Who is like you, majestic in holiness, awesome in glorious deeds, doing wonders? You stretched out your right hand, and the earth swallowed them. You have led in your steadfast love the people whom you have redeemed. You have guided them by your strength to your holy abode. The peoples have heard, and they tremble. Pangs have seized the inhabitants of Philistia. Now are the chiefs of Edom dismayed. Trembling seizes the leaders of Moab. All the inhabitants of Canaan have melted away. Terror and dread fall upon them. Because of the greatness of your arm, they are as still as stone. They are as still as stone. And Moses asked this rhetorical question. Who is like God? Who is like God? What's the answer? Nobody. Nobody is like God. But he asked that rhetorical question. Who is like you, majestic in your holiness? Who is like you in your character? Nobody is like you in your character. Who is like you in your deeds? Nobody is like you in your deeds. And then he says, well, let's take a look at some of these deeds. He says, you've led your steadfast people whom you love. You've guided them by your strength to your holy abode. So no one is like God in his character. No one is like God in his deeds and what he has done. In fact, the people of the inhabitants of the land they are going into are so terrified of God because he is the supreme God that Moses highlights 7 different words to say how terrified they are. It says that in verse 14, they tremble. Pangs have seized them. They're dismayed. Again, they're trembling. They've melted away. Terror and dread have fallen upon them. And lastly, they are as still as stone. God being the supreme God means that there isn't even a chance for these nations where Israel is going. It's not even going to come close for them, and they know that. Now, one of the interesting things about it that I love about this passage is it's almost as if it's already happened. Do you see that? You have led. They have heard. They're still standing at the edge of the sea. They haven't gone to Canaan. They haven't gone to the promised land. And they're standing there. But it's one of these prophetic passages, as Moses sings, that it's as good as done because of who God is. God had made the promise all the way back to Abraham. He had told them what was going to happen. He had told Moses, I'm going to lead them out and I'm going to take them to the promised land. And Moses sings, this thing is as good as done as anything else. Just in the same way that God has just delivered us and destroyed us from the Egyptians, that is how sure it is that we are going to be going into the promised land. Sorry, I lost my spot there. So we worship God because he is supreme, because as these nations hear of what God has done, now maybe their report wasn't that he blasted them with his nostrils and destroyed them, but the way that God destroyed them with water, the way that happened, the way that the Israelites marched out from underneath the most powerful nation in the world, puts absolutely amazing fear into the land of Canaan, into the promised land. And you notice at the end, once again, we have in verse 5 that they went down to the depths like a stone. We have in verse 10 that they sank like lead in mighty waters. And a description. So, the Egyptians are like stone, they are like lead, in that they are dead at the bottom of the sea. Even before God gets to the promised land and all the peoples in the promised land, they are already playing possum. Because God is on his way. Because Israel is on his way. They are as still as stone. And Moses uses the same phrase to describe the nations that they're coming to. That they're already there. They're already as still as stone. They're pretending to be dead because they don't want God's wrath to come upon them. They don't want to be consumed by his fury. And so we see that Moses says, they are as still as stone. One of the things I really enjoy paying attention to, I don't watch too much of it, but I really enjoy paying attention to, and we just came through, is March Madness. Anyone watch March Madness? One person, okay. All right, but in the States it's a lot bigger, and I know there's a number of people who watch March Madness in Canada. March Madness is the NCAA men's basketball tournament that takes place every single March. 64 teams are a part of it. And why is it called March Madness? Well, it's called March Madness because of the number of upsets that happen during the tournament. And so during the tournament, you have some teams that you've never heard of. Random teams like the University of Gonzaga that I had never heard of until I went to the States. You're like, Gonzaga? Where's that? It's out in Washington. And so you have these random universities that actually have a chance at winning and doing really, really well. And they come in as a nobody, and they knock off a couple really, really good teams, and all madness breaks loose because they're celebrating because they never expected that they could do that. Well, it's great because March Madness is so exciting like that. There's no excitement in the land of Canaan before the Israelites come. Because there is nobody who's sitting there saying, well, maybe we as the underdogs might be able to possibly do this. There is still a stone because they realize it's over for us. There is no way. And Moses declares that they are still a stone already because God is the supreme God. The gods of Edom, the gods of Moab, the gods of Philistia are nothing compared to God. There is no way or no chance that they have it. There is no madness in this. There is no madness. Because there is no chance that they would ever defeat God, the supreme God. And so we worship God because he's a personal God. We worship God because he is a powerful God. We worship God because he is the supreme God. But we also worship God because he's a gracious God. We also worship God because he's a gracious God. The powerful God, the supreme God, is also a gracious God. And look with me, if you will, starting in the second half of verse 16. Till your people, O Lord, pass by. Till the people pass by whom you have purchased. You will bring them in and plant them on your own mountain. The place, O Lord, which you have made for your abode. The sanctuary, O Lord, which your hands have established. We should worship God because he is a gracious God. Moses switches from this prophetic tense back to a future tense. Why do I believe he does this? I believe he does this because you end the song with some excitement of what we're looking forward to. You end the song with some excitement of what we are looking forward to. We are looking forward to God bringing us into his holy abode, bringing us to his mountain. And where do we see God's grace in this? We see God's grace in his protection and deliverance from Israel. That till they pass by, till they have gone through everything that they have gone through. We see this in that he has purchased Israel. He has redeemed Israel. Why did God choose Abraham? Doesn't say. Just chose Abraham. In fact, right before he comes to Abraham, it just gives a genealogy of all of Abraham's forefathers, none of who were indicated as God-fearing men. And God comes to Abraham and says, go over to a place I'm going to send you. And it's just God's choosing and God doing it. And it was nothing in Abraham to make God say, I'm going to choose that guy. I'm going to make a nation out of him. And what does Israel do to deserve being delivered out from Egypt? Nothing other than they are God's chosen people. And that God wants to purchase them. They haven't done anything, but God says, I'm going to be extending grace to them and purchase them. But not only that, but this is, right, the powerful God, the supreme God. He not only purchases them, they're not only his people, but he wants to dwell with them. He wants them to dwell on his holy mountain. Now that is something that's unheard of. Now when I was a kid and we studied Greek mythology at